Hello and welcome to this episode of I Don't Know Jack About Parenting, where today I want to talk about when your kid comes to you and says, "Dad, I hate school."
So the big question is this: how are parents like us, who don't have a manual, who are doing the best we can, who feel as though we aren't enough, how are we going to raise healthy, happy children who we are proud of and still keep our sanity in that process? That's the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Ryan Roy, and welcome to I Don't Know Jack About Parenting, a podcast for parents who are being real with themselves.
Welcome back to this episode of I Don't Know Jack About Parenting, where today I'm going to talk about how when my 7-year-old came to me and he says, "Dad, I hate school, but I love learning." And I had to ponder that for a minute, right? I didn't just I don't know about you guys, but I wasn't so fond of school as a child myself. But I do know that I don't want my son to have a hate of anything, much less school. But then I loved that he's like, "I love learning." So I asked him a couple questions, right? And I just learned this yesterday, and I'll reference the Bible here in a second. Somebody shared this with me. It says, when Jesus in the Gospels, he asked like 137 questions, or he was asked directly 137 questions, and somebody asked me, "Do you know how many he answered?" And I said, well, if we're talking Jesus, probably he didn't answer any of them. He probably answered them with more questions, like, "What do you think?" And he was a master at that. I was told that he responded with 357 different questions or responses to those original 137 questions. He only answered 3 of them directly. So when you're posed a statement, the best way to do anything is to just ask more questions. And so I asked him, I said, "So let me ask you a question. You love learning?" And he's like, "Yeah, I do. I love learning all kinds of new things." I said, "Well, fantastic. Well, what do we go to school to do?" And he's like, "To learn." And this is where it got interesting. He goes, "But the way they teach is just so boring." And my wife was standing close by, and she says, "See, I don't like those worksheets they send home." And I thought to myself, and I remember when he was in kindergarten, he had some worksheets. He had some stuff that came home, and we were watching the Olympics, which this goes back to a chapter of my book, Watch the Olympics. Be the dad you wish you had. Watch the Olympics with your kids. At the end of the Olympics, he asked me, "Dad, can we write Michael Phelps a thank you letter for representing the United States so well and entertaining us?" And I was like, "Absolutely." So he sat down, and I said, "What do you want to say to Michael?" And he really couldn't. He wasn't really spelling. He knew his letters, so he could write it out, but he really couldn't formulate. So I wrote out what he wanted to say, and I said, "Just copy this and write it in your own handwriting." And I'll let you know, we never sent the letter to Michael Phelps. I imagine it was never going to get to him. It's a memento of ours. But then he said, "Can we make a little booklet of the Olympics and the favorite things I like watching?" So he loved watching beach volleyball, and he loved watching track, and we watched some basketball. We watched a little bit of boxing. So we ended up sitting for 4 hours one day making this little scrapbook. And then at the end of it, my wife at the time I don't know, she just wasn't putting 2 to 2 together. She says, "Hey, he's got to get those worksheets done." And I was like, he's in kindergarten. He didn't do any worksheets. I didn't say this in front of him, but I was like, he just sat here for 4 hours and learned. He drew. He colored. We cut out construction paper. We wrote volleyball. We wrote basketball. We talked about the Olympic rings and the different colors. We talked about different countries. We sat there and we wrote Michael Phelps a letter. He practiced writing and using his letters. And he had fun doing it. this world, we're subject to whatever schools give us to learn. But at home, we can do whatever we want. I can say yes to this 4-hour project, but 4 hours of engagement, he and I talking, he and I reminiscing, he and I writing and cutting, right? Because cutting scissors and writing your letters and all those things are things that you're learning at that age. And we had a blast and a ball, and it wasn't boring. He didn't hate the process. Now, why would I want to, after he just practiced, I talked about practice in previous episodes, when he practiced, why would I want to give him now work that he doesn't want to do, that he despises, when in disguise he did everything that he needed to do to practice the skills and what the teachers wanted him to learn. Now, I don't have the homework to turn into the teachers, but that's okay. I know he's learned what he needed to learn. Parents, listen, I don't know jack about parenting, but I know this for myself, and you probably know it for yourself. If it's not fun, if it's not enjoyable, we're going to lose our interest really quickly. Now, I'm not saying that the entire world or everything we do has to be fun, but we can make things more enjoyable. So some of the homework that he has, and he didn't want to do homework that night. I said, listen, go on the computer, go on to the math website that we have, go in there and do some of the stuff. He can do the math. He just doesn't want to sit at a table and do it. He'll play a game and do the math and learn the same skills. Why must we, or the school, or anybody, make learning boring? Because that was his word. It's boring. And I really don't want my son to be bored when he's learning. I want it to be fun. I want it to be interactive. I want it to be something that, like he says, I love to learn. You know, spring is coming up. They're talking about blooming and this and that and the other. He and I went for a hike just the other day. And first thing I do, I walk into this woody area. I said, what do you notice? I said, do you see the little leaves starting to sprout? We found our neighbor cut down some trees. I asked him how old the tree was. He says, how would I know how old the tree is? We went and counted rings. We went up to the stump. And I said, each one of these little rings represents a year. Can you count them for me? Now, I can tell him that, or he can experience that. We only truly know what we experience. And if we can experience these things, if we could experience life, if we could experience looking at an anthill and watching how the ants work, when he gets to science and they talk about the worker ants, he will have witnessed it firsthand. When they talk about the rings on a tree, when he counted them, he will have witnessed it firsthand. But we need to bring these things to their attention as parents. When we walk into an area or the trees are starting to bloom, we sit there and say, listen, spring is here. And when you see the leaves, I'm looking around right now as I'm driving, and I'm seeing these little tiny leaves on these trees, and it represents new life. But if you share those conversations and they're not looking down on a video game console or grabbing your phone, they want to learn. They are sponges. But it's our job as parents to share our knowledge, to point these things out so that they learn to love learning. And it doesn't always have to be so boring. See, what they give us at school, they kind of have to do. But we can choose to teach them in other ways, just knowing that they will learn the material. And if they could pass the test and they know the material, let's try not to make it so boring. I'll see you in the next episode.
Do you want to be the dad you wish you had? If so, go get my free book, Be the Dad You Wish You Had, at BeTheDadYouWishYouHad.com. Inside, you'll find my most effective 40 tips to quickly and easily transform yourself into the ideal dad. Go to BeTheDadYouWishYouHad.com now and get it while it's free.